Welcome to Key Tech. Please describe this channel if you are interested in today's video. Japan ignored warnings from all parties around the world and insisted on discharging nuclear wastewater into the sea, which aroused widespread concern and strong condemnation from the international community. As the closest neighbor to Japan, China is also threatened by the risks to the marine environment and public safety caused by the discharge of nuclear sewage. In order to protect its own interests and the ecological environment, the Chinese government quickly adopted restrictive measures and completely suspended the import of Japanese aquatic products to show its solemn attitude towards Japan's irresponsible behavior. However, the Japanese government has completely ignored China's restrictions and threatened to sue the World Trade Organization, WTO, to force China to lift the ban. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida protested with a tough stance and sought high-level dialogue with China, trying to resolve the conflicts between the two sides through diplomatic mediation. Japan's complaint and counterplan. On September 4, Japan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs officially submitted a written document to the WTO, stating that China's import control measures after the discharge of nuclear wastewater into the sea were totally unacceptable. The Japanese government strongly demands that China immediately lift its restrictive measures and hopes that both parties will review relevant measures in accordance with the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. However, the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs immediately responded by saying that China has repeatedly made clear its position on Japan's discharge of nuclear-contaminated water into the sea and believes that the Japanese government's move is extremely irresponsible. China's restrictive measures are completely legitimate and reasonable, and are designed to protect people's lives and health and the safety of the marine ecosystem. Moreover, the international community has generally expressed concern about Japan's discharge of nuclear wastewater and has taken corresponding preventive measures, which is natural. Kishida Fumio's plan to sue met with an unexpected counterattack. According to reports, more than 100 people in Japan plan to file a collective lawsuit in court to demand an end to the discharge of nuclear wastewater from the Fukushima nuclear power plant. These people believe that the Japanese government promised to seek the consent of its fishermen before making a decision to discharge nuclear wastewater, but ultimately broke its promise, ignored the strong opposition from Fukushima and nationwide fishery organizations, and insisted on discharging nuclear wastewater into the sea. Nowadays, Japanese seafood products are restricted by many countries, which is entirely self-resultant. Under pressure from public opinion inside and outside Japan, Fumio Kishida had to take action. He expressed his willingness to have face-to-face talks with Chinese senior officials and tried to improve Sino-Japanese relations through various channels. However, due to China's firm opposition to Japan's nuclear wastewater discharge, Kishida Fumio's request for permission may face rejection. China's reasonable stance and Japan's seeking trouble. The Chinese government's restrictive measures against Japan's nuclear wastewater discharge are reasonable and necessary. China is the largest importer of Japanese aquatic products. For Japan, the import restriction order is undoubtedly a heavy blow. On the one hand, Fumio Kishida tried to lift the restrictions by petitioning the WTO, and on the other hand, he sought dialogue with top Chinese officials in an attempt to be forgiven. However, the fact is that the various actions demonstrated by Fumio Kishida are inconsistent with his original policy statements. He has said that the Japanese government will consult domestic fishermen and obtain prior consent before discharge. But in fact, the Japanese government completely deviated from its previous commitments, ignored the opposition of the public and fishery organizations, and insisted on discharging nuclear wastewater into the sea. In this case, all the consequences that Japan is suffering now are entirely at its own risk. Fumio Kishida's request for a meeting also showed his recognition of China's decision-making influence on the matter. He first wrote a handwritten letter and prepared to forward it to China, but unfortunately, the trip of Natsuo Yamaguchi, the leader of the Japanese ruling party Komeito, who had originally planned to visit China, was cancelled. Subsequently, Fumio Kishida looked for Toshihiro Nikai, a pro-China figure in Japan, hoping to improve Sino-Japanese relations through him. However, due to the current situation and China's strong opposition to Japan's nuclear wastewater discharge, there is still great uncertainty about whether Toshihiro Nikai can successfully obtain an invitation to visit China. In short, the Japanese government ignored the world's concerns and the opposition of the international community, and insisted on discharging nuclear wastewater into the sea, which violated the bottom line of the international community. As a neighbor of Japan, China's restrictive measures on its behavior are fully reasonable. Fumio Kishida tried to lift the restrictions by petitioning the WTO and engaging in high-level dialogue, but this seemingly sensible move was actually asking for trouble. The only correct approach is that the Japanese government should stop discharging nuclear wastewater, fully communicate with neighboring countries and the international community, and address the concerns of all parties. The Japanese government's insistence on discharging nuclear wastewater into the sea has aroused global attention and doubts. As Japan's closest neighbor, China has an unavoidable responsibility to protect its own interests and environmental security. The comprehensive suspension of restrictions on the import of Japanese aquatic products is not only a condemnation of the irresponsible behavior of the Japanese government, but also to safeguard the lives and health of its own people and the safety of the marine ecological environment. The Japanese government's choice to petition the WTO seems proactive, but it cannot escape the reasons for this situation. Fumio Kishida tried to improve Sino-Japanese relations by finding opportunities for dialogue with high-level Chinese officials, but in any case, he could not escape the consequences of his government's wrong decisions. This incident aroused dissatisfaction and motion among the Japanese people. They demanded to stop the discharge of nuclear wastewater and implored the government to reconsider this decision. The Japanese government not only faces condemnation from the international community, but also condemnation from the domestic public. This incident also has a profound impact on Sino-Japanese relations and requires both sides to resolve it through dialogue and seeking consensus. Overall, the restrictive measures adopted by China are reasonable and necessary, aiming to protect the safety of people and the environment. The Japanese government insists on discharging nuclear wastewater despite opposition from all parties, and tries to get out of the predicament by filing a petition with the WTO and seeking dialogue. This behavior is the result of its own consequences. The Japanese government should stop discharging nuclear wastewater, communicate with China and other countries, and find solutions together.